Obsidian Peak did not merely rise from the earth, it pierced the sky like a jagged, frozen fang. It was a mountain that did not welcome visitors, it tolerated them, much like a predator ignores a flea until it bites. Lyra felt the wind shriek against the reinforced leather of her riding gear, a sound like 1,000 dying wolves mourning a lost moon. The air was thick, a suffocating mixture of wet pine, ancient stone, and the metallic tang of impending snow. It was a gritty, realistic cold, the kind that didn't just chill the skin, but seeped through her heavy furs to settle deep within her marrow, a permanent resident of her bones. She wasn't the pampered daughter of a lord anymore. That girl had died years ago in the frost.
Now she was the silent survivor, the woman who had clawed her way through the red winter when the world had turned into a slaughterhouse of white and crimson. She bore the thin silver scar on her jawline, not as a blemish, but as a badge of her endurance, a jagged line where a rogue's blade had nearly claimed her voice. Her horse stumbled on the treacherous gray slush of the pass, its breath hitching in fear. Behind her, the human envoys huddled in their saddles, their faces pale and eyes darting toward every shadow. Their breath came in ragged white plumes, a rhythmic ghosting of their terror. They feared the mountain. They feared the man who sat at its summit. But Lyra's fear was a different beast entirely.
It wasn't a cold weight. It was a humming wire in her blood, a frantic vibration that signaled the proximity of something primal. "He is close," her internal wolf whispered, a low, tectonic vibration in the back of her mind. The scent of iron, the scent of a king. Don't bow, Lyra. Predators don't bow to their own kind. The gates of the fortress were a brutal display of law and politics. There were no shimmering portals or ethereal enchantments here. Instead, massive ironwood doors, reinforced with rusted chains that looked heavy enough to bind a god, groaned open on hinges that sounded like a scream. This was the raw, heavy engineering of the Shadowmane, a pack that had survived 1,000 years, not through sorcery, but through the sheer, stubborn refusal to die.
The great hall was a cathedral of shadows and flickering orange light. Long, soot-stained braziers lined the walls, casting a natural glow over the scarred faces of the pack. At the far end, sitting at a table of oak so old it had turned black, was Vane. He didn't wear a crown of gold. He wore a mask motif, charcoal smeared across his eyes in a jagged, lethal line that made his amber gaze seem to burn from within a void. Vane was the Alpha, a just ruler whose power wasn't based on the erratic cruelty of a tyrant, but on a terrifying, unwavering sense of order. He was the anchor that held the chaos of the mountain at bay. As Lyra walked down the center of the hall, the silence was cinematic, heavy enough to crush the lungs.
The only sound was the rhythmic, solitary thud of her boots on the stone. She felt the weight of their collective gaze. Every wolf in the room was marking her, measuring the frantic pulse in her throat, looking for the flicker of weakness that would justify a kill. Vane finally looked up. His eyes weren't glowing with some magical light. They were a deep, realistic amber, filled with the weary intelligence of a man who had seen too much war and buried too many friends. "You are late, envoy," Vane said. His voice was a gravelly baritone that didn't just reach her ears. It vibrated in her chest, rattling her ribs. "My pack doesn't like to wait for peace. Hunger makes them impatient."
"Peace takes time, Alpha," Lyra replied, her voice steady, despite the heat radiating from him like a furnace. "Especially when the price is as high as the one you've set. My people do not trade their sovereignty for scraps." The Treaty of Teeth wasn't just a political document, it was a claim. Vane stood, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow Lyra whole. He walked around the table with a predatory grace, his movements silent despite his size. When he stopped, he was so close she could smell the cedarwood, the ozone of the coming storm, and the faint, metallic tang of the charcoal on his skin. He reached out, his fingers calloused and warm, and caught her chin. He tilted her head back with slow, deliberate intent, forcing her to meet his gaze.
His thumb grazed the silver scar on her jaw, a touch that was almost a caress, yet carried the weight of a sentence. "The humans sent a survivor," he murmured, his breath ghosting against her lips. The sensations of the moment were overwhelming, the heat of his hand, the rhythmic thud of a war drum in the distance, and the way his pupils were blown wide with recognition. "They think your scars will make me merciful. They don't realize I find them beautiful. They are maps of a soul that refuses to break." From the shadows, a woman stepped forward. This was Sybil, Vane's primary advisor. Her beauty was sharp enough to draw blood, her eyes filled with a refined, ancient malice. She wore silk that looked like liquid night, a stark, insulting contrast to Lyra's rough, travel-worn leather.
"A broken bird is still a bird, Vane," Sybil hissed, her voice like silk over a hidden blade. "She is a spy wrapped in the skin of a martyr. Kill her and take the lands by force. That is our law. That is our way." Vane didn't break his gaze with Lyra. "The law is mine to interpret, Sybil, and I see a Luna, not a spy." The banquet hall was not a place of celebration. It was a theater of war. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, heavy ale, and the underlying pheromones of 100 wolves on edge. Lyra sat to the right of Vane, her chair carved from the same dark oak as his. Every movement she made, the way she lifted her silver goblet, the way she cut her meat, was scrutinized. Sybil sat opposite them, her eyes promising a slow, agonizing death.
"You eat like a woman who expects her last meal," Sybil said, her voice cutting through the low growl of the hall. "Is it true, envoy? Do humans believe that a wolf's table is always a precursor to a wolf's teeth?" Lyra didn't flinch. She had survived a winter where her people ate leather and hope to stay alive. "I eat like a woman who knows the value of strength," Lyra replied. "Something your pack should appreciate, provided they haven't grown soft on silk and spite." Vane's hand, massive and warm, came to rest on the table between them. The heat radiating from him was a physical weight. "She has the heart of a hunter," Vane rumbled. "Perhaps that is what my advisors truly fear. They recognize a predator when they see one." As the night wore on, Vane's attention never strayed.
He tracked the pulse in her neck, the way she gripped her knife, and the way her inner wolf paced behind her ribs. "He wants to see you break," her inner wolf whispered. "He wants the fire behind the ice. Give it to him, Lyra. Show him that a survivor is more dangerous than a conqueror." When the heavy ale began to take hold and the room grew rowdy, Vane leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. The contact was electric, a jolt of pure friction. "You haven't touched your wine," Vane murmured, his breath hot against her ear. It was a private sound in a room full of noise. "I prefer to keep my wits when I'm surrounded by those who would see me dead," Lyra whispered back. "A wise choice," Vane said, his fingers grazing the back of her hand in a slow, deliberate claim.
"But out here, wits only get you so far. Eventually, you have to trust your instincts. The hour is late. Sybil, see to the boarders. Lyra, stay. We have terms to discuss that are not for public ears." The private solar was stripped of posturing. Only a single massive hearth threw deep, flickering orange light across the room. Vane had removed his heavy fur cloak. In the firelight, his muscular frame was visible through his thin linen tunic, his mask of charcoal now slightly smudged. "You speak of treaties, Lyra," Vane said, his voice dropping into a low vibration. "But your father sent you as a distraction. He thinks if I am occupied with a human bride, I will forget the lands he stole 10 years ago." He stepped forward, closing the distance, but he underestimated one thing.
He underestimated what happens when a wolf finds a mate who doesn't know how to run. Lyra's internal wolf let out a triumphant howl.
He sees us. I'm not a prize to be won, Alpha, Lyra said, her breath hitching as his thumb moved to the corner of her mouth. No, Vane agreed, his voice becoming a dark, spicy caress. You are a debt to be collected, and tonight the interest is due. The kiss wasn't a fairy tale. It was the raw collision of two survivors. But the dawn didn't bring peace. It brought blood. Sybil burst into the chambers as the first light hit the stone, holding a blood-stained parchment. The humans have broken the treaty, Sybil hissed. Your father has moved archers to the Black Brook. They've taken 3 scouts. You aren't a bridge, Lyra.
Vane's gaze turned cold, the just ruler replacing the lover. Is this true? Did you come here to stall me? I came for peace, Lyra cried. Then prove it. Sybil stepped forward, a vial of swirling mercury-gray liquid in her hand. Drink the silver root. If your wolf is pure, you survive. If you are a spy, you will never see the sun set. The vial felt like a sliver of ice. Lyra looked at Vane and saw his agony. A king, bound by the laws he created. She uncorked the vial and swallowed. The reaction was a raw assault. Lyra's knees hit the stone. Her veins turned black, mapping her skin in shadows. She gasped, clawing at her throat as the poison searched for treason. Vane roared, catching her as she fell. The law must be...
Lyra! Choked out. But then the black veins receded, turning into a brilliant liquid silver. The room began to vibrate. The shadows didn't retreat. They coiled around Sybil's feet, staining her hem. The silver root reveals the source of the lie, Sybil, Vane growled, standing to shield Lyra. And it isn't pointing to the south. You moved the archers. You forged the report. Sybil's scream of rage was cut short as the guards took her. In the great hall, Vane stood before his pack, his hand on Lyra's shoulder. The law of the peak is a shield for the loyal, Vane's voice boomed. The treaty stands, but the debt of this betrayal is paid in blood. He fastened a heavy silver collar around Lyra's neck, not a mark of a prisoner, but of a queen.
The peak is ours, her internal wolf whispered. No more hiding. We are the shadow. As the doors threw open to the midday sun, the shadow mane stood as one. The war was coming, but the treaty was signed in silver and blood. Lyra had survived the poison, but the throne was a different kind of venom, and the hunt was only just beginning.